Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automate It. I, of course, am your host, Stefan Oxmacher, CEO and co-founder here at Polymath Robotics. Sitting across from me is a man who looks like he has not slept in approximately 2 months. Sir, have you just wandered in off of a street drug fueled high? Like, why haven't you slept?
I mean, that's basically better than having a newborn. I would agree with that. It's about the same level.
Again, I'm Stefan, across from me is Ilia. We're your hosts here at Automate It, our weekly podcast that we've missed for about 2 months, where we talk about robots, how to make robots, all sorts of fun stuff with robots. Like, what are some of the reasons that we've missed episodes? I think
so. Newborn was one of them.
Yep.
I've been harder to schedule with.
I was on the road for about 2 weeks straight.
Yep. Our producer Nicole has been out as well.
And if she doesn't tell us to do stuff, we basically don't do it.
Yeah, we're basically children with power tools.
While we were out, we actually got some really, really positive fan email messages, including from a great father and I think son or daughter combo who regularly listen to our podcast. So if you're out there, thanks for listening. One of the folks on our team compared us to Car Talk, and that made a small childlike part of me so incredibly happy. So George and Finn, thank you so much for reaching out. It means a lot to us. So this is our podcast. We do 2 steps to this podcast. First, we make up a robot as we go based on cards that we draw at random from our deck. And then we talk about a topic in robotics. And Ilia, what's the topic going to be today?
I think we got a kind of a little bit of a smorgasbord of stuff we've been thinking about in our sleepless haze in the last few weeks.
Yep. We're going to talk about academics a little bit.
Yeah. VCs and how they impact the robotics community. I think that's been a favorite topic of ours a few times now.
And for about 2 months, Ilia really wanted us to talk about the room temperature superconductors. And I kept on saying, no, let's wait till it pans out. And it turns out not to have. So now I'm going to get to make fun of him for that. And that just warms my little heart.
I'm just so sad. There's still a chance, but it's a vanishingly small chance now.
So with that being said, let's play our game. Ilia, why don't you draw a business card to figure out what type of business environment we'll be working in, and then I'll draw a tech card to see what type of tech we got to make.
All right, golf course.
Golf course.
This is Stefan's favorite game, by the way. If you ever want to send Stefan a gift, golf clubs, golf balls, golf hats.
I actually don't hate golf. I golfed quite a bit. I last went with my grandma in 3rd grade. My wife was in varsity golf, so I refused to play with her because I like to pretend that I'm better than her at all sports, even though she's a natural athlete and I'm a natural klutz.
Like all good husbands.
I'm just trying to keep her down. So, and for golf course, let's do cloud computing for robots.
Excellent.
And so there's a couple of different ways we can take cloud computing for robots. One of them is a real example of a company that we definitely won't name, though you probably have heard of, where they actually do all of their compute in the cloud and none of the compute happens on robot. So is that how we want to do cloud computing for robots, or do we want to do like software backup stuff for robots?
I think we should do the former, but for golf courses in particular, maybe we compute where clouds are going to be so that you can figure out the rain pattern. But I guess we're not an ML shop here. We actually make stuff.
I mean, we could do stuff like use drones to detect weather patterns to help you better shoot a ball.
No, even better one. In China during the Olympics, they did the cloud seeding stuff.
Yep.
To prevent rain or cause rain. There we go. Cloud computing for cloud computing.
Or just making it so that it never rains on your golf course or, any of the nearby farmland.
Yes, exactly. I mean, what's more productive? Food to feed people?
We don't need that.
Or literal grass for rich jerks?
So when it comes to robots in golf, there's a couple of different tasks that people looked at a lot. Mowing lawns has been talked to death. It's actually weirdly complicated to mow a golf course because people want, grass to be cut a certain way. And it's kind of overdone. It's kind of too close to real. So I love the 1980 something classic Caddyshack, where a definitive B storyline is on the hunt for a gopher.
Oh, I thought you were talking about B movie. I was trying to understand where you're going.
No, the B storyline throughout that whole movie is Bill Murray is hunting for a gopher, and he resorts to making little plastic explosive gophers that he drops in gopher holes. He tries shooting them with a rifle that has a flashlight taped to it, and he eventually blows up half the golf course and still doesn't get the gopher. So I think we need robots that kill gophers, because like poison, that's just too convenient. Let's have a robot that is operated from the cloud that hunts small animals that might be a pest to your golf course.
I mean, I feel like we can't alienate PETA listeners any further. I also feel like the listeners who like golf and the listeners who are part of PETA are, the Venn diagram of that is 2 circles. So I think we're okay. But yeah, sure. Let's do it. A gopher hunting golfer robot.
Yes.
Using cloud computing.
And like actually what might be useful for something like this is if it's a relatively, like, the reason you need it to be cloud computed is it's a relatively cheap robot. So like, let's say there's an infestation of some sort of varmint on any golf course. You just give every golfer at their tee time like a little robot. And if they see a possum or a gopher or a raccoon or a neighboring dog, they can just put this little robot on the ground and it will hunt them down.
Just scuttles after them.
Yeah.
This is something at a Terminator plot now. I feel like I would be much more interested in golf at this point. More for the robots, to be clear, not the animal destruction.
While we're talking about it, I'm assuming it's a legged robot.
To add to the creep factor.
Like almost like centipede-like. It just like scurries off.
No, it has to be one of those, like, the movie like The Ring or something. It has to be a humanoid, but that crawls on all fours backwards. just for extra creep factor. No, but to your point, like cheapness, actually, you can try to hit a gopher with a gun or a laser or something like that, right? But
Bill Murray couldn't hit him.
Right. But what Ukraine has taught us is the cheapest thing is a off-the-shelf UAV, like a, just standard consumer one with some C4 on it. That seems to be the most effective weapon they have. So,
but gophers are much smaller than Russian tanks.
No, of course, but your explosive charge should also be sanely sized.
I mean, I'm just more thinking like you have this little robot centipede.
Yeah.
You like throw it on the ground when you see a gopher and it just scurries off and it like stabs the gopher.
Why is it? No, but here's the thing. The reason we want to do offboard compute is because you could have disposable robots that just go up and just blow up. Well, and it'll just kill everything in a 1 meter radius.
But they can't mess up the greens. The greens are sacred. That's the most unrealistic part of all of Caddyshack is when he blew up the golf course. Because like, a deranged groundskeeper, shooting a gun and like, hitting flowers with a golf club, that's fine. But messing with the greens is a non-starter.
All right. It's a very small nuclear payload. that lets off a neutrino emission specifically that kills only animal life.
Just gives like a very specific fast-moving cancer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, neutrino bombs are a real thing. Look it up if you're interested. There you go.
I don't think we need explosives. I think we need to like prong it through with a little spiky.
Sounds so bloody. Oh.
Well, yeah, but like it's probably chasing the gopher down a hole.
All right. What if it just goes to be somewhat more sanely peaceful minded? It finds the gopher hole and it drops a poisoned bait.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Let's just do that. Let's do that.
That's more logical.
Right. And so in we want to use cloud computing on this thing because it needs to scurry reasonably quickly. And we don't want to load it down with a lot of sensors and compute and that sort of stuff.
Probably just thermal cameras tracking gopher-shaped heat sources.
Yeah. Well, I mean, doesn't matter if it's gopher-shaped. Like any heat source below a certain size. Like I feel like golf clubs, you're not going to find unattended infants crawling on the ground.
Smaller than a toddler.
Yeah, exactly. Any four-legged thing on a golf course in the middle of the night probably shouldn't be there.
Or during the day.
No. Let's restrict it to night only.
No, I'm thinking the golfers drop it on the ground and it scurries off and runs.
Scurries, yeah. In its weird, the ring, backward walking zombie
little centipede thing.
Yeah, little centipede thing.
So it scurries. I mean, like, I think what would actually be neat about that is you could just put the poison in the hole. So, like, things that aren't pests would eat it. So, like, a little Fluffy the dog won't go in that gopher hole.
Yep.
So, to wrap this up rather quickly, what's the state of insect-like walking robots?
Pretty terrible.
Okay.
So the main problem with walking machines, which we've seen in Humanoids Everything, I've harped upon this before, is that motors are nowhere near as efficient as muscles.
Yeah.
And so as amazingly, immaculately designed engineering-wise you can do, your motor is still 2 orders of magnitude heavier and less energy efficient than muscles.
Yeah.
Especially for insects. For insects, it's like 5 orders of magnitude or 6 orders of magnitude less efficient. The smaller you go, the harder it is for machines to compete with biology.
Yeah.
And the bigger you go, the inverse. Like at some point, machines beat biology.
So realistically, even if we're piping all the sensing and compute off board, that's fine because we're still going to need an 8-pound battery
for all these motors.
12-pound centipede.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think the nice thing you could do off board is you could run really, really accurate ML models to really make sure it's actually a gopher and not a toddler or a dog.
I mean, if that toddler's living in a hole in the golf course, it might be worth poisoning.
I mean, that's a scary proposition to find some.
So, okay, the motors are basically a non-starter. It's essentially not feasible to actually build a robot this size, even if compute is off board.
Walking, no, especially centipedes and stuff. You're like every motor adds more and more and more weight.
Yeah.
Wheels are just better, especially on a golf course where it's relatively.
So if it was treaded, we might have a chance.
I wouldn't do treaded because you're going to tear up your grass.
Yep.
Right. You'd still do
so like 6 soft wheels or something.
Yeah, like soft wheels, 4, probably 2, even if you wanted to do bipedal sort of motors. Then pretty simple onboard cameras, network connectivity to do all the cloud ML magic.
Yep.
On recognition.
You'd also probably have to set up the golf course with about $1 million worth of connectivity.
I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, most golf courses are within range of LTE. Like golfers don't like to be completely out. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm looking stage right again. Would you like to be off of network when you're golfing? No. Like you still want to get your messages right.
Okay.
So, and sending up an image to get a response back from AWS or any cloud service, half a second later is not heavy.
Okay.
You're okay.
So it's a little 2-wheeled robot that's live streaming all of its stuff to the cloud to chase it down. I actually know someone who was building something similar to this. I think they were selling them for like in the $3,000 to $6,000 range.
Yep.
I mean, it wasn't for poisoning ferrets. It was for like security. But I think like
a boring application.
Yeah.
Why would you ever do that?
We need to chase more ground mammals.
Yes.
So I think that's probably a reasonable thing. If you give every golfer a $5,000 robot, and if they see any pests that are ground based, now the problem with wheels is we can't climb trees.
That's what the flamethrower is for.
And with that, I think we'll move to our next subject.
Wait, we haven't come up with a name for it. All right, I'm going to call it the gopher. 3,000. That's right. All right, on to our main discussion topic.
Oh man, that would really freak some people out. So digging into our main subject today, I was at a really cool dinner a couple of weeks ago with, it was a VC who was relatively new to robotics, myself, another robotics founder, and then 2 academics from, let's call it a name brand lab owned by a name brand big tech company. And like there was this really interesting disconnect where the academics were kind of like, yeah, nobody writes papers on autonomous cars anymore because it seems like it's solved.
Yeah, everybody can just buy an autonomous car. Just ask Tesla for one. It'll work one day.
Like I was taken aback. Like these are people where like if they said that on a stage, a lot of people would go home and say autonomous driving is solved. And I was incredibly surprised at this like massive disconnect between academia and let's call it industry.
Yeah, I think the difference tends to be in robotics, but in academia more broadly. Solved meaning the concept is understood, and there's a lot of engineering related detail work to get it to actually function.
But that's a minor detail.
It's not even. No, I mean I think academics are not that dumb. They understand that like the devil's in the details sort of thing. And even though you can calculate how to launch a rocket ship, actually launching a rocket ship is not the same thing. But that's just not interesting to them, and that's not where academics should be. Like they're they need to be pushing the field forward into areas that nobody has really thought of or has really developed before. Yeah, spending time taking an undeveloped idea and finessing it doesn't tend to be an academic project. It tends to be an engineering, although there's engineer academics. Yeah, but even in their case, they're developing new algorithms, new control laws, new ways to do a particular task. So I get that disconnect. I think the connection tends to be also, I mean, there's academics who think too much of themselves, of course, as I'm sure we have a proud tradition of doing here as well. Never. But
I'm the most humble. I'm the Marion Barry of robotics.
The most humble. I just hear that in my head in all caps on Twitter. Like
it bums me out that you didn't get the reference I just made.
No, sorry. Not enough American culture.
Marion Barry was the famous mayor of DC in the 90s with great quotes like, I'm a very smart man. I'm a very intellectual man. I'm a very humble man. He was also caught once among ladies of lower repute and said, what can I say? I'm a night owl. He's a particular character whose quotes page is well worth a read.
I mean, it feels like a less offensive Donald Trump, honestly.
It's pretty great. He's pretty terrific.
Oh, boy. But yeah, so, to give them credit, I think when they say something is solved, they mean it is understood how you could theoretically do this.
Yeah.
I don't think most academics mean it is a product you can buy. They just mean if you wanted to, if a company could make money off of it, they could build it.
I mean, something that was brought up there was like the strategy of how you choose what to write a paper on.
Mm-hmm.
And that like you want to write a paper on something that like theoretically could have a big wave and be a big impact and be some big new discovery. So I think like to your point, you're not going to make big waves being the 85th paper about how self-driving cars might kind of be cool one day.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a topic probably for a better podcast than this one, but science currently has a replication crisis in general.
Yeah.
Where it's very easy to get a published paper on an interesting effect. It's very hard to get a published paper on a failure to replicate or a null effect or no effect.
Well, I think that brings up our next topic. A month and a half ago, there was a lot of excitement over the possibility of room temperature superconductors. I know that you desperately wanted to make one of our podcast episodes just about how cool superconductors could be. So I guess, Ilia, in 30 seconds, how cool would it be if we had superconductors?
Well, I mean, I'm going to start off by saying I regret tattooing LK99 on my forehead. Seems to be a bad decision in retrospect. But no, so a superconductor is basically something that could move electricity with no resistance, which doesn't sound like a big trick. But the thing that makes it really interesting is that makes it also an infinite battery. If you had a loop of this wire and you put it in a circle and you just pumped power to it, it would keep circling forever. And so the big thing, there's limitations on this on the magnetic field. So my
cell phone could get even smaller?
Cell phones and small electronics probably wouldn't be the first thing to benefit from it. The big stuff would be city energy grids, power stations, cars, trains, that sort of thing.
Unimportant stuff.
Yeah, unimportant stuff. Maglev trains today generally use superconductors generally, I think, in both the rail and the train itself. So these exist. Superconductors are a real thing. You can go and look at them in Japan, for example, parts of China, but they require liquid helium or liquid nitrogen to cool them, which has limitations on energy density and how to cool them and things like that. Anyway, long story short, the holy grail of physics, of applied materials physics right now, is to find a superconductor that doesn't need cooling so that you just have a wire of some magic material, you inject some power into it, and it just stores it forever.
And they would just so happen to float.
Well, yeah.
Which I think is the most important part.
One of the fun effects is, of course, I'm sure Simon's going to be upset at me, but Lorentz force is that when you pass current through a wire, you get a magnetic effect that repulses. So, magnets and power are the same thing, just seen from different lenses. And so, yeah, you get some nice magnetic effects and those sort of things. But I think the main thing is our energy crisis in a lot of ways would be resolved. So we wouldn't need we could use more renewable energy. We wouldn't need as many fossil fuels. Practically overnight, we could change the way that humanity uses energy.
So a couple of weeks ago, there was a big announcement that someone had seemed to have made a room temperature superconductor.
That's right.
And everyone kind of lost their mind.
Oh,
It was pretty exciting in nerd world.
Yeah.
People were really, really into it. There's people thinking about changing careers. There's all of this stuff. I know there was a big thread in like the YC social network about like, hey, who knows about this? And can you dig into it? Can you do this? Can you do that? There's people who like had applied physics backgrounds who are saying this looks a little iffy. There's people who like read 5 TechCrunch articles who said this is going to be the biggest deal in the world. What happened there, Ilia?
Well, so one small correction, not only room temperature, but room pressure. There does exist room temperature, but megapascal pressure superconductors. So you need to pressurize them for them to work. So what happens is it's not actually still clear exactly what happened. The effect so various teams tried to reproduce it, including some guys in their backyard who streamed the whole thing on Twitter, basically trying to reproduce this material. It's surprisingly easy to make. It's lead and copper sulfate and a whole bunch of other phosphorus materials. However, some teams publish that they do get small amounts of very low conductivity in regions. Some teams don't publish that. Some teams get repellent effects. Some teams don't. So overall, it doesn't seem to be as much of a smash hit as it first seemed. But there's still kind of a question of the physics of this particular substance seem a little weird, and there hasn't been yet a final word of what exactly is going on.
Well, I think there's the challenge is, and I can't remember any of the words, and I was trying to pull them up quickly. Some of the attributes of LK99 led people to believe that it could be a room temperature superconductor, and there's other things that can have those same attributes. Mm-hmm. And right now, the prevailing theory is LK99 is actually one of those other things because it doesn't do anything else a room temperature superconductor could do.
Yeah.
And that like the actual study coming out of South Korea was like kind of poorly done. And they published directly to a lower tier level of publication. And they did a bunch of stuff that like got it out the door, but maybe didn't make it as checked. And it seems like the kind of current status quo is, as people started checking it, they started saying, this doesn't look like that big of a deal. It's something. They made something here, and like maybe it's useful, maybe it's a step in the right direction. But we have not achieved that holy grail of room temperature superconductors as of recording.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting cycle. Like we probably went like 6-8 weeks ago. Holy crap, we have room temperature superconductors. We're going to have infinite power, infinite whatever. To this is bro science.
Yes, exactly. And some of that happens in robotics. I think every time I see a nice Boston Dynamics video, it's all this kind of, to my mind, it's the same thing of very complex controls, very interesting demo set pieces. But demo set pieces and having it done in the academic sense, to our earlier topic, does not mean it's useful. So Boston Dynamics does a lot of really great demo videos of them being used in like theoretically construction and search and rescue and all this kind of stuff. But showing that they can do a demo in that space is not the same thing as actually doing it in that space.
Yes.
And it's kind of similar here, where having a one-off sort of data that sort of looks good is not the same thing as actually deploying it at scale.
Well, what I thought was interesting is, I'm like, because this is so different than what we see as a robotics startup, is when you're publishing an academic scientific paper, the primary people who read it are able to understand it, are able to try to replicate it, are able to kind of deeply know the nitty gritty of what you're doing. And if you're fibbing, and like, sure, you can get in Newsweek magazine with the the abstract says this looks great, but you can't win a Nobel Prize off the abstract. You have to win the Nobel Prize off of replication. Whereas when you start a company, no one ever actually checks your work. It's just all a matter of like, do customers buy it or not?
Yeah. And do customers come back and continue to work with you and they're not just being scammed?
Like there's an article I read in Premium TechCrunch, special person TechCrunch the other week, where basically VCs fundamentally don't understand what CTOs do and fundamentally can't do tech due diligence. And I would call out, like, in the, I don't know, mid $30 million that I've raised to venture capital in my career, I have yet to have an institutional venture capitalist, or possibly any investor, look at our code base.
Yeah.
Look at our code base, look at documentation, get a sense of how the thing actually works. Some people have done architecture reviews, but to be honest, I think the architecture reviews were more to see how good engineering leadership was than actually seeing if it made sense.
To talk through how well do they present. Yeah, exactly.
And like, I think there's this interesting disconnect where in academia, if something looks like it kind of works, that's good enough for a field, or good enough to say yes, yay or nay on a whole field. But to say that something's actually doable is a high burden of proof. Whereas in business, you only can get rich if you make it work at scale, but you can convince a lot of people it works at scale without anyone checking your work.
Yeah. And we keep seeing these boom bust cycles for different industries. Like crypto is most recent and that kind of stuff.
I mean, we're seeing stuff in AI right now that I think comparably when people realize that the difference between model number 1 and model 72 is a 0.04% improvement in good results.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a similar
for the low cost of $5 million of data. Yeah. I read, I think on one of our investor chat groups about Sam Altman from OpenAI discussing Sam. It is Sam. Yeah. Okay, not crazy. Saying that they want to double the processing power of their models every 6 months, which I think is a great idea.
It's a great statement. That sounds terrific.
That sounds amazing until you remember that hardware doesn't go that fast, and software tends to lag hardware, right? And Moore's law is all nice and good for compute, but Moore's law at best doubles every 18 months.
Yeah.
So either they're quadrupling the amount of compute that they purchase for every new model, which is doable when you have a lot of money.
Yeah.
But there is a point where, to your point, like a 1% improvement is not worth the $1 billion you're going to spend on it.
I mean, I think real numbers are GPT-2 costs like $60 million a train, GPT-3 in the $700 to $800 million range, GPT-4 in the $2 to $4 billion range.
Exactly.
So like it doesn't just, each of these models is percentage points better and exponentially more expensive.
Exactly. And so I would love for that to be the real future. And everybody loves an exponential curve because it does. Humans are not built to see them.
I think, to be clear, I think these technologies will power a decade of SaaS improvements.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not AGI.
Yeah. Making the jump from extremely intelligent, in the computing sense, intelligent, general purpose text interpreter to full true intelligence in that kind of cycle is it's a big step, not the least of which because we don't actually understand what powers intelligence yet.
but stop it on the hype on the particular hype cycle.
Yeah.
I think digging more. I want to dig more into this idea that academics can check, but sometimes don't. Investors don't really check outside of metrics, and I think it has interesting applications for robotics.
Yeah, and there's a lot of hype chasing as well.
Yeah.
Like humanoid robots suddenly are the hot thing again.
Yep.
There's a lot of investment going into that. I'm still a bit of a skeptic there, but that's a different question. It's weird because VCs, and you know this market better than I do, but I can't imagine they do 1,000 deals a year.
No.
Even a big firm.
Nope.
And I can't even imagine that most firms do more than 100 deals a year. Like most of them probably do.
A typical partner who writes $5 to $10 million checks is probably only writing 3 to 5 of those checks a year.
Exactly.
They're probably meeting with 3 to 4 new companies a day.
Exactly. So that funnel, if you think about it, 3 companies a day to 3 checks a year is, 100x, 200x funnel. Mm-hmm. Or 300x. I feel like once they get past the initial meet and greet and chat, they have the bandwidth to do some real deep diligence.
No, not really. I mean, just take those assumptions a little bit further. So if let's say they invest in 3 companies a year, they might get close to or nearly invest in 5 to 6. That might mean that they're bringing a company to a partner meeting every other month. And they're probably getting close to bringing a company to a partner meeting every month, every 3 weeks. So that's let's say a 3-week cycle. But by the time they want to bring something to a partner meeting, they kind of have to make their yes or no decision. Mm-hmm. If they decide not to fight for a company when they bring it to a partner meeting, they lose a lot of internal stock.
Yeah, because why would they?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you had a 3-week cycle. You're spending 4 hours every day in meetings with new companies.
So why not run the back end, right? Why not have technical advice groups that review the every other month company that's coming in? If the VC firm has, I don't know how many partners, 5, 10,
whatever,
pick a number, right? Why not invest in a technical team that does due diligence before a company arrives?
Because that's overhead and that decreases the amount of money that goes into companies. So VC firms, when Polymath goes and raises a Series A, we will actually have to pay for the VC firm's legal fees because they don't want that cost on their balance sheet, even though they're giving us the money that we're going to pay on legal, because that decreases their capital efficiency. So there are VC firms with technical advisors, but think more like a former portfolio CTO who they pay 50 to 100 grand a year to look at whatever they kind of think is interesting that week.
Yeah.
That's not like an expert team to dig into humanoid robots versus healthcare AI tool.
But you'd think that a team that does that, maybe they'd be less capital efficient, but they'd win more deals, right? My naive engineering sense says
my hunch is that it hasn't panned out.
Yeah. Why?
My hunch.
Yeah. Who knows? We're spitballing here.
Yeah.
Why?
But my hunch is a theory that I had at the end of Starsky was some of the investors who knew the most about what Starsky was doing and how the autonomous industry was shaping out were making good bets, but those bets weren't necessarily being picked up by the rest of the market.
Mm-hmm.
Because being in a frontier tech thing, picking the right team or picking the right technical strategy is, I don't know, less than a third of what makes for a winner. Another third is the company doesn't just implode under its own stupidity or sexual harassment or whatever. And then the other third is like, do other VCs get it? Does it make sense to the rest of them?
So it's actually punishing VC groups if they don't follow the herd in some ways.
Yes. Unless that VC can take the investment all the way.
Yeah.
Which like some of them purport to be able to, but is really hard to do with their LP support.
Yeah.
So like I to go back to like the time use analysis, if they have to get close to an investment every 3 weeks, if they lose half of every day meeting new companies, let's say another third of every day supporting companies in their current portfolio, maybe in those 15 business days, they can spend 5 hours digging into a subject. And I don't know about you, Ilia, but if you had to judge an investment in a B2C leather goods company and how technically apt it was, and you had 5 hours, how smart do you think your opinion would be at the end?
I think I'd be pretty swayed.
And I think the challenge is that like that's the amount of time these folks have to make these decisions, and then no one ever really gets called out for being wrong in terms of technical strategy, because there isn't the world of academics hasn't looked at some particular on-road autonomy company and said the way they were designing around this edge case was dumb. The way that they were thinking about hardware here was dumb. This idea of theirs on controls was really smart, and everyone should do this. Like the loop doesn't get closed in industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Whereas for LK99, everyone could take a look at it and say, like, smells like something, but doesn't smell like a superconductor.
So how do we solve the world's ills?
I don't know. We just make the thing work.
Yeah. We just try to make autonomous vehicles. That's how we solve the world's ills.
And if you want your vehicles automated, you reach out to Polymath.
Yeah. Specifically Stefan. That or golf clubs. Both can be sent to Stefan.
As long as they're juniors. So on that note, Ilia, what are we talking about next week?
I think we will start off the episode with an apology for not having a timely episode, because that seems to be a theme currently. We do really apologize for that. We really love doing this, but it's been a real hectic few months.
We also have multiple customers with big demos in the next month.
Yeah, our office, though wonderful, is still full of boxes to give listeners an idea of our current priorities. I'm looking directly at a pile of a Starlink, a Nerf gun, some compute hardware, and a bunch of U-Haul boxes. So that's how life is right now. And on that note...
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.